Oh yeah, you clicked the right video. We are talking about throwing hands, but with magic, which I don't know if it's pushing it for a sponsored video. Ritzy, let me cook, please. But I do love a good fight scene. They can be incredible, especially when it's not solely for the sake of being flashy or just something cool to look at. A lot of people seem to forget the term has scene in it, not just the fight parts. But ooh, when you toss magic into the mix, things get wildly interesting and volatile, because fight scenes can already go so many different places: an alleyway knife fight, a boxing ring, a duel, slapstick hand to hand. Then we bring in magic and it is just infinity times infinity, and boy is it glorious to see, at least when it's executed well enough, which sounds easy but is terribly deceptive. One thing that is very important to a fight is the immediate setup and scenario, the exposition. Regardless of whatever happened to get the characters to the point where the throwing of hands commence, the bounds of the fight still need to be set. Like I said, there is also the scene part, not just the fight. And this isn't always the case, but scenes usually get exponentially better when they can stand on their own as this mini story, especially more so when it comes to a fight. And that setup and exposition for the fight becomes an even bigger point of consideration when magic gets involved. So it's just this ever increasing layer of stuff to keep in mind. But fear not, for I am here to spout some nonsense and hope some of it sticks. Maintaining tension is a big part of fight scenes, and that is going to depend on and be affected by that exposition. And so we have our first proper sprinkling of the arcane. When it comes to the setup for magic fights, there are a few factors you can play around with. A lot of them are going to revolve around the magic system itself, which sounds like the most obvious thing ever, but there are different aspects to it. Like for instance, the reader's understanding of said magic. I could honestly probably do a 30-minute video around readers' perception of magic. For now though, we are concerned about what they need for the immediate fight, which could range from not a lot to do I really need to know all this? However, getting to this point and having it feel natural and understood enough for a fight, difficult. Because a fight is usually going to be fast-paced, it is a prime way to cause hiccups in that pacing when you start explaining every move they're doing in the middle of it. When you have to pause a story to deliver exposition, it almost never lands. Side note, anime is extremely prone to this, and I've been exposed to it so much that I almost find it endearing, but it can also really enhance the story, like JoJo's for instance. It is already so over the top, and then they just start explaining their moves in the most ridiculous way, and it is just perfection. But a lot of the time, it's not going to work. When expositing an understanding of the magic system, it is ideal for the most part when the legwork is done earlier in the story, when you've talked about the magic in the context of not the fight, so that when we get to the actual throwing of hands, that fast pace is not interrupted. For example, in Mistborn, Vin, our main character, has been kind of using her Allomancy abilities to steal as she was on the streets and con people. And we kind of already start to get a feel for her powers, and then we add the extra element of actually getting training and testing her powers, so when a fight actually shows up and she pulls out a vial filled with metal particles, drinks it, and turns into a little flying murder machine, you're not as confused as you would be. But another aspect of the magic system understanding and exposition is the actual characters doing the fighting. The level of understanding they have for the magic system also has to be communicated, again, to an extent. This is where I toss a quick fighting is subjective, and it's going to depend on the individual fight in question, because they're all idiosyncratic. No two fight scenes are the same, and if they are, it's usually for thematic reasons and the details are still different. But the tension between two fighters with similar level of understanding in the magic system is going to be different than a newbie versus a master. One is an intense battle because one party is very underexperienced and it's pretty much a horror movie for them, and the other battle is intense because anyone could win and each fighter has to hone in on their focus just to get the slightest edge. Understanding which one you as the writer needs for your story could mean learning exactly how well each of the fighters understand the magic system. But that doesn't mean it has to be exposited to the reader. That's why the reader's understanding is a separate entity, and it's why I say it's subjective. The tension could also be swayed by keeping it a mystery from the reader. How much does this opponent we're facing actually know about the magic system? I thought this was going to be easy, but could they be better than our MC? But when it comes to the characters, it isn't just about expositing what they understand, but also where they are, and I'm not talking about location. Did they just finish fighting a horde of zombies? Is their magic on the fritz, a blessing from their patron deity, a broken wand, mana depleted? All of this is going to affect tension and change how the fight works, and if it's supposed to be a surprise revealed later on during the fight that gives either character an upper hand, then Chekhov's gun is planted way earlier in the story, so it's forgotten about. Barring the chance of a Chekhov's gun story device coming into play, because again it's objective, then you as the writer need to justify it some other way or or it starts to cheapen the fights and reduce the impact. I always harp on this, but keeping the stakes is so important, and that is even more so with fight scenes. But that is a topic I am getting to. One more aspect of exposition is the nature of the magic system itself. Is it a harder system or a softer one? With harder magic, it can generally be played more like a mundane fight, because with a mundane fights, they're not breaking the laws of physics or throwing sunbeams at each other. We go into every fight with the predisposition of understanding what human beings are actually capable of, how easy bones can break, how high they can generally jump, what blades can do. That could also be pushed to extremes depending on the suspension of disbelief the story allows, but when a magic system becomes hard enough, we get that same understanding. This is what magic spell A does, this is what magic spell B does. You can only fly this specific way, you lose your mana shield if you do this. Rules that allow that inclination we have towards the natural world to build up for a fictional one. Rules that ground us. But a softer system can't have the same application if it's to adhere to its softness. Or rather, if it is to have the same application, it is going to play differently. Attend what I have dubbed the perils of a soft magic fight. Number 1. Fight scenes are mostly dependent on an understanding of the governing rules. Rules not meaning hard, fast laws we obey, but the bounds we've set for the fight. Except we can't come up with rules for the magic because it stops being soft, which I'm assuming the writer is striving for in this particular scenario. Number 2. Unpredictability is almost a prerequisite. When we can't rely on the groundedness that understanding brings to generate that tension, if the magic is still playing a significant part in the fight, then we might have to lean more into the unpredictability of a soft system. But it is going to depend on how soft the system is, which kind of goes back to number 1 being that we set the bounds for the fight. If the system is completely undefined, then we can run into the problem of being able to circumvent any issue in the fight with some new magic, eradicating tension and stakes. Again, that cheapening effect. Though there are always exceptions, and leaning harder into the negative consequences and outcomes might help it work better. Think about it like how wild magic in D&D works if you're familiar with that. But if the system's a little bit more defined, then we're starting to enter the realms of rules again, and we get a little bit more leeway. It might not be on the level of specific magic thing A does magic thing B, but if the characters can initiate some sort of intent to receive an outcome with the magic, then there is enough substance that we can ground ourselves with that. And if we want to lean more into the softness, the nature of the outcome could be played with. Number 3. Not all soft systems are created the same. I don't mean that in terms of the hard-soft scale, I mean this in how the system exhibits its softness. Let me explain. There are 2 ways I see this happen. 1, the system is soft because nobody knows what's going on. The system is this intangible, amorphous thing to both the readers and the characters in the story. And 2, the system is soft because the readers don't know what it's capable of, but the characters fully do. Again, it's that different levels of understanding coming into play. The first one kind of plays the way we've been discussing so far. The second gets wildly interesting in the context of a fight. Take this fight from Frieren, for instance. Spoilers, but Frieren doesn't care about spoilers. It's still great regardless. So in later episodes, they're doing a dungeon raid, and the final boss is Dark Souls Frieren, which is terrifying because it's Frieren. And the show has a softer magic in that it is only explained in specific instances. That exposition for the setup that I talked about earlier. Except for when a spell is properly explained, all we get is that spells do things. And something else that adds to the softness of the system is the fact that spells are so plentiful and varied. So here's this tiny corner that the audience is actually aware of and understands. Here's the spells and magic the character knows, and this is the rest of it just existing in the world. With that out of the way, we go back to the dungeon boss fight. The softness of the magic and how vague it is to the audience is never made more apparent than in this fight right here, and it is still a fantastic fight. Since Frieren is engaging a perfect replica of herself and it can do everything she can, it's basically a game of understanding. We already have that groundedness from the basic understanding of the system. And it's also communicated to us that Frieren understands more magic than anyone else in this fight, audience included. She can magic the best, and since her replica can as well, they cancel each other out, leaving Fern, who also understands more magic than the audience, as the deciding factor. The bounds of the fight were expertly set up before they went into the room, and at no point did we really need to know the secret gotcha that this one spell has for the fight to work. Frieren and her counterpart were literally creating black holes and magic storms, and we understood absolutely none of it. And what helps it land even harder is the thematic elements involved in the story surrounding the fight. An understanding of the magic was never needed for an understanding of the stakes, which brings me to my next major point, and we kind of have to zoom out to fight scenes as a whole. What makes a good fight scene? Good choreography? Sure. Awesome supporting dialogue? Fantastic. Intense emotions? Could be. But every time I think about this, the answer is overwhelming stakes. What matters? Why are we throwing hands in the first place? What got character A to put their fists up and say character B needs to get it? That is the starting point. The answer to that will determine the impact of the fight, because even in action stories where people are prone to fisticuffs, they don't just start punching each other for no reason. They have something they're protecting, a person whose goals they're fighting against. It's not just, and then we fight now because the story said so. Well, most of the time. And it reminds me of something Tom Bromley said, where if you can raise the stakes significantly for your characters, the more there is on the line, the more exciting the read. Tom then goes on to talk about stakes and peril in general, but to bring it back to the context of a fight, the higher the stakes, the more inherent excitement within the fight. It's why after the reason and goals of the characters are established, I skip straight to the outcome, because again, it's a scene first, not just the fight part, and the basic function of any scene is to progress the story. An understanding of stakes leads to an understanding of plot progression, and by extension, it makes every punch hit harder. This person lost the fight, therefore this and this happens, or if they won, what did they achieve? What did they part with along the way? I've recently been taking a writing course by Tom Bromley that is on Reedsy, and it really helped with the refresher on stakes. It wasn't going to be as big of a part in this video as it is, but understanding Tom and what he was putting down about stakes made me realize that it needed to be, because peril is such an important part about fights in general, not to mention magic fights. But Tom is an international bestseller, and he's the instructor throughout the course. The course aims at getting you to complete your novel from scratch in 3 months. If you guys would have noticed, I posted a little while ago on my community tab that I just completed a first draft, and I was looking for something new to work on while I edited that one on the side, and this was just the perfect fit. It's been really eye-opening, some of the things Tom talks about. I mean, I'd like to say I have a solid foundation in writing, but having someone who's gotten to the places you want to get to lay down some knowledge is never wasted. There are daily videos, weekly webinars. It's a very deliberate course. I get a decent amount of comments from people who do something writing adjacent, like world building, but have always wanted to write right. This would be fantastic for that because of the structure that you get. There is a community there as well, and you have course mates that keep you accountable. There is really a lot packed into this. Check it out if you're really looking to get your feet grounded with writing and sprint through a draft. There will be a link in the description if you want to find out more, and thanks to Reedsy for sponsoring this video. Now, taking it back to stakes, from a magical standpoint, the way magic adds spice to a story is the same way magic adds spice to the stakes of a scene. That element of implausibility and impossibility. The biggest con that realistic fiction pulls over the reader is convincing them that everything isn't completely made up, convincing them that everything doesn't exist to serve a story. Pulling that con becomes infinitely harder in fantasy, and granted, you might not always want to convince the reader that this story could be real. Depending on the story, you might want to lean into the fact that everything is made up. But when it comes to stakes, I found that leaning into those impossible, fantastical elements always serves to deepen those takes. And when I was really starting to think about this, I was trying to see if it got past novelty, if there was just a depth to magical fights that mundane fights couldn't reach. But it really is just novelty of the impossible that sets it apart. Aside from that, similar stakes could be achieved in a mundane fight, similar tension. But the novelty of magic and the impossible just amplifies everything from that base level. A magical fight can just simply do things that mundane fights can't. While a mundane fight derives its tension from the fact that it could be real, that you could very easily imagine what it's like for a knife to drive through your jugular, a fantastical fight can give you all that, but can also add the excitement of crazy, fantastical things happening. Take this fantastic scene from N.K. Jemisin's 5th season. Spoiler warning, but this is relatively close to the start of the book. So, we have our MC being run out of town because it just got out that she has magic and people are bigoted. And right as she's at the gate, someone tries to attack her. You see her though, mostly out of the periphery of your vision. Then everything happens too fast to think, and because you don't think, because you've been trying not to think, and this means you're out of the habit, because thinking means that you will remember that your family is dead and everything that meant happiness is now a lie, and thinking of that will make you break and start screaming and screaming and screaming, and because once upon a time, in another life, you learn to respond to sudden threats in a very particular way. You reach for the air around you and pull and brace your feet against the earth beneath you and anchor and narrow, and when the woman fires the crossbow, the bow blurs towards you. Just before the bow hits, it bursts into a million glittering frozen flecks. Okay, someone needs to find Jemison. She can't keep getting away with roast is good. Down below your feet and everyone else's, a shake begins. It's hard to tell at first. There is no warning jangle of Cessna as there would be if the movement of the earth came from the earth. That's why people like these fear people like you, because you're beyond sense and preparation. You're a surprise, like a sudden toothache, like a heart attack. The vibration of what you're doing rises, fast, to become a rumble of tension that can be perceived with ears and feet and skin, if not sapane. But by this point, it's too late. Now, could the same tension be derived from someone with a trigger to an underground bomb? Yeah, but that novelty of reaching into the earth with your forbidden powers, of being able to split it open with a mere thought, a trigger is not doing that. I mean, the narrator even describes it because they're beyond sense and preparation, because they're a surprise. So lean into it. I mean, the possibility of impossible things is one of the major reasons people read fantasy. At least it is for me. And while we're mentioning novels, a side note I want to talk about is that prose has a distinct advantage when it comes to magical fights. While it can be visual like other mediums, it has the unique ability to really get inside people's heads and see what they're thinking, facilitate their emotions, which is fantastic for mundane fights. But again, that novelty amplifies everything, including the view inside the character's head. Also, another thing prose is inherently awesome at is soft magic specifically. Because it thrives at getting in the character's head, it can just stay there instead of focusing on the mechanics of the fight as it happens. It can describe the feeling and emotions of the battle, and through that fantastical lens as well, how it feels to use the magic, how difficult it was to tap into, rather than the specific details on the level of magic thing A does magic thing B. That bird is going to get murdered. But let's get into those specific details. Notice how I haven't talked about anything involving the blow-by-blow, more the general overarching nature of the fight. And that is because the blow-by-blow is incredibly boring, and it is a big ask to not make it boring. She punched him, he punched back, she did a 360 backflip into an uppercut, he dodged and caught her legs in a sweeping motion. It gets so tedious and so repetitive so quickly. Even in the visual medium where we can derive excitement from actually seeing what is happening, it can get stale. That's why they'll cut every few seconds, mix it up by having different elements come into play, or just crank the visual factor to the max with awesome choreography, interrupting the punch block of it all. But you can do it in prose with dialogue interrupts, getting in the character's head, feeling their emotions, and having the battle there for a bit, like I mentioned. You could also take a beat to show the toll the fight is taking on the characters, the states they're in. This shouldn't be universally applied, but I found that the blow-by-blow stuff of she punched him, he blocked her works better in small bursts before one of those pattern interrupts. I actually quite like the blow-by-blow, so I'll write as much as I want and then cut back later in post, because at that point it just feels like a boxing match report rather than a scene. But the pattern interrupts need a pattern to interrupt, which is the blow-by-blow. With magic specifically, it's spellcasting, magic slinging, mixed with a little bit of hand-to-hand depending on the magic and character in question. Aside from the pattern interrupts, to make the actual spell slinging interesting, you could add variation to the style of magic each character is using. If the magic system doesn't allow for that, then the variation could be how the characters use the magic rather than the magic itself. Also, depending on the type of magic, the blow-by-blow might lose the spell slinging aspect for a bit and get back to the actual hand-to-hand. There's also the environmental aspect you can bring in, and you could do the same thing with mundane fights, but it's one of those things that gets amplified because of the magic. Using the environment with magic could be grabbing two skyscrapers or tossing trains. It could be jumping off a cliff knowing your opponent can't follow, or a hero holding back because they could destroy the city around them. All of it accentuated by that novelty. Aside from being one note and still, another thing to keep in mind with blow-by-blow is the imagery. It goes without saying that the visual mediums get a leg up with this, that TV shows, movies, animation, and graphic novels can use lighting, framing, colors, and composition to tell a story in a way prose writers just can't. But we can use imagery in a different way. Since we don't get the actual full image, we can be selective with what we do show, what we reveal to the reader about the scene in front of them, eliciting different effects and emotions by choosing to depict how rank of a feeling it is to use blood magic rather than its destructive effects. Both are valid, focusing on one over the other brings a different feel. Lean into the strengths of your medium. But that leads me to the storytelling aspect of the blow-by-blow, except I like to lump pacing, choreography, and the thematic elements into what I like to call the flow of the fight. Once again, it is a scene first and a fight second. What is the story being told through the battle? What aspects of the character's personality is being revealed by how they wield the magic? Like the finale of Avatar, Aang is constantly on the defensive, almost never initiating and holding true to his pacifism, even in the most deadly fight he's ever been in, even when he has a clear kill shot on the Fire Lord, and even when Kyoshi takes over and says, "Let me show you how it's done, kid." He refuses to take Ozai's life, leaning into the larger themes throughout the show of choosing your own destiny. The choreography is intertwined with the themes, elevating and advancing the story even more. And the pacing follows suit, playing a significant role as well. With fight pacing, there is how fast or slow you're hitting the story beats and the constant up and down of the fight. Story beats are the important moments of the fight fact that you can kind of map out in a bullet point outline a character losing an arm or being reckless with their powers and hurting innocents, or maybe they unlock a new layer to their powers or land a blow on the villain for the first time. This is where I usually start, then I map out the choreography and put the characters where they need to be for those beats to happen. When it comes to that constant up and down though, I'm talking about who has the advantage in the fight, and a lot of times it is constantly switching. One fighter was doing well and then the other found an opening, or they were getting pummeled and they muster up their final strength, or they were holding back and got a green light to go full throttle. It can say a lot about the character who has the upper hand and for how long. If one character is constantly dominating, then it can feel like they lose the advantage when the other character feels like they have a plan that's going to work, only to have that plan utterly flop and the other character remain dominant. You still get that back and forth without losing the feeling of the character being out of their depth. You can get real creative with it. And once more, magic amplifies. If someone is winning but it turns out that they were just in Itachi's genjutsu the whole time, it not only negates everything they've done but also shows them how underpowered they are. Fights are always interesting, and action writing is one of my favorite things about fiction, but magic can only serve to amplify that, and especially when it's executed properly. But that comes with knowing what magic does to a story and the specific places where it amplifies. I yap a lot more about that in this video right here. Hope I made some sense to at least 13 of you. Okay, bye. It can say a lot about the character who has the hopper. Damn, that H factor coming out like crazy.